Another Thursday morning is upon us. Good morning and a warm welcome to your perfect day start of the morning brief. I'm Itodo.
Yes, indeed. The best way to do it is to do it. So it's another day to get up, show up, and we'll help you do just that on your perfect morning starter right here on Channels Television. Good morning. Welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
The best way to do it is to do it. So let's do it this morning. What is the big story, really? A number of them, and as always, we'll ensure that we'll give you the very healthy dose of these stories to ensure that you're well informed and we're able to have some brilliant, thought-provoking conversation for the good of our nation and for the world at large. And naturally, we're getting started with the series of meetings that President Bola Tinubu has been having, but one of them sticks out, and that's the meeting between him and the suspended governor of Rivers State, Mr. Siminalayi Fubara. The president met with him. There were rumors that he had met earlier on outside the country, but this one, there is proof to it. So we're starting off. It's been 3 months since a state of emergency was declared in Rivers State. And we're going to be taking a look at how far has it worked out so well for the people of Rivers State or not. That is the big story we're starting off this morning with. 3 months since the state of emergency. How far so far?
And that's not all. Amid growing insecurity concerns in the country, in northern Nigeria, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, is calling for the fencing of the country's borders with its neighboring countries. We'll be speaking with security experts about the feasibility of this move and, of course, other myriad security issues. Don't forget that just yesterday, the Chief of Defense Intelligence was telling reporters that security has improved in the north, east, even north central, and he also mentioned south as well. Is that the case? Of course, we'll be asking those very important questions. I'll be putting them through to experts, and of course, we'll be getting your own feedback as well on the program.
And ahead of the Anambra governorship election, we'll be taking a look at the task ahead of Independent National Electoral Commission. But the bigger picture really is this movement called Fix INEC. What needs to be fixed in INEC, by extension, the electoral process. That's what this stands for. So we'll be speaking to all of those issues to ensure that our selection process is better than the average, at least what we've seen so far. So Fix INEC is one of the conversations we'll be having on the program this morning.
And of course, we'll be taking your feedback as well. So you can send us your email. You can also send us your contributions via social media. And there's a lot to come on the program. Akadi.
Oh, yes, definitely. So let's start off with what the front pages are saying this morning. How do they capture the big stories across the country and even outside? The dailies are next. Welcome to the show, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Of course, caught up in that festivities traffic. Just if you go to Kara Bridge right now, it's literally chaotic. People are racing out of the city of Lagos. I just got told myself, who is left in Lagos? Who is going to be left in Lagos after what I saw today? And this is just before 7 a.m. So you can imagine what happens between now and say 9 a.m. So safe journey to all the people traveling. That's all I can say. But let's get straight to the dailies, guys. Where do we start from? Maybe the Blueprint newspaper, right? Okay, let's get started with the Blueprint newspaper, where it's leading with something quite important. Disinformation played significant role in Nigerian civil war. Disinformation played significant role in Nigerian civil war. That's coming from former President Olusegun Obasanjo, talking about the role of disinformation. There is misinformation, there is disinformation, which simply talks about deliberately twisting the facts for an agenda in that sense. If you want to find out the details of that, you can go to page 8 of the Blueprint newspaper. And just beside it, you see Salah, ram prices soar, traders lament. Ram prices soar, traders lament. I wish I could know the exact price of ram right now, but within my neighborhood, I saw like 6 cows. I was like, okay, this inflation doesn't seem to have anything on the people around, but it's good to see that despite whatever it is, people are taking advantage of whatever it is they can take advantage of to celebrate this Salah as much as possible.
Well, you can get an idea from our conversation with the gentleman yesterday that ram is hovering around, in terms of pricing, between 300 and 400,000 naira. Now, that is an all-time high because, you know, some people purchased ram for around between 50 and 60,000 naira just 2 years ago. But that's the current reality. Away from ram prices and Salah celebration, let's head over to the Guardian newspaper this morning and take a look at what the big story is saying. Now, look at it. Donor fatigue hits 331 PHCs, over 400 staff put north in dire straits. And top that, you see foreign aid withdrawals. That's the big story on the front page of The Guardian. And, you know, there are some explainers. United States of America, $60 billion cut, 90% cut in USAID aid contracts, halting global development and humanitarian programs. You see United Kingdom, £6 billion cut, aid reduced from 0.5% to 0.3% of GNI by 2027. European Union, 2 billion I believe euro cut proposed. The EU plans a 2 billion euro aid cut. You know, so that's a big reality staring us in the face there. And, you know, following that US policy under the Trump administration, there have been reflections on about how Nigeria needs to begin to look inwards and fund its critical sectors by itself. And that's it from that particular story. But take a look at the one above the big story. Natasha caught someone Akpabio Nwebonyi for defamation. Find details on the inside pages. You particularly find the details on page 5 of the Guardian newspaper. That's it for the Guardian this morning.
I can't help but just notice that story about defection rumors swirling as Adeleke Fubara meets Tinubu in Lagos. Well, the governor of Osun State met the president with his nephew and his brother. So are they all defecting as well in that sense? Well, take a look at the front page of New Telegraph newspaper, and this is what you find there, what I just spoke about. Defections won't save APC. 2027 will be a referendum. That's coming from the PDP. Says party stronger after INEC meeting. We'll bounce back, Saraki says. So, yeah, pages 2 and 7 of a New Telegraph newspaper today. And I love the optimism of politicians. So maybe there's something we're not seeing that the PDP is seeing from the inside. But we have the benefit of inside view and outside view. And what we're seeing, well, let's just say, maybe different from what we're reading here. But again, maybe they're seeing something we're not. And I think it's even for the good of democracy that we have a strong PDP or a strong Labour Party, a strong opposition. So that is our desire, that we have that. But hey, optimism is not just a strategy. You need to do the work. So that's the big story on the front page of the New Telegraph newspaper this morning. And as we count down to June the 12th, you can see on the front page, my parents sacrificed a lot for Nigeria, Lekon Abiola. And I must also mention the big picture on the front page, just right after we had that conversation with the executive officer of CIPS, that's Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, as Mr. Ben Farrell. He had a meeting with the governor of Lagos State. So exactly, we hope that the issues around procurement are really escalated to that level so we can reduce corruption around procurement and the rest.
It's going to take a long haul to be able to read corruption in the system except there's something really aggressive, which is what some of us are expecting the present administration to do. I haven't seen enough sufficient willpower and sufficient, in terms of legislation and action, to show that, in fact, any government, even Muhammad Buhari, former president, who touted the issue of anti-corruption, at some point he knew that the institution of corruption was even stronger than him. And unfortunately, his health also took a hit in that sense. And we've been saying that until corruption and the rule of law, those twin, since we now talk about twin policies, those twin, I'm not sure what to call it, corruption and rule of law, if it's properly tackled and properly upheld in that sense. So if you're found corrupt, so the Arabians, the Gulf guys, they know how to deal with corruption in their way. Communist China know how to deal with corruption in their way. The global North, Europe and America, they have a way of dealing with corruption. We adopted what the global North does, and we haven't gotten the kind of results we need to have. Corruption has to be tackled headlong from people in government, people that just left government. If we really follow the rule of law, a lot of people will be in jail. I'll keep saying it, because we don't know how a lot of these politicians who now have war chests made their money. But if just simple analytics, guys, of tracing how much you earn, what you were before you came into office, significant number of politicians should actually be in jail, because it's clear that a lot of them stole money. But, it's a system. It's a system. So let's hope that there will be a day when Nigeria will be bold enough, or have a leadership that is strong enough to say this has to stop or minimize at a very drastic level, and procurement may be one of the ways, guys, to start off.
And it is not for nothing that, we were saying yesterday that the office of the director, the helmsman at the commission, that's the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, is a very, very tough one, and that's why the exit of every boss of the commission is always, shrouded in either controversial or difficult circumstances. So the reminiscent of what it said, that when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. So, but we must continue to ask those questions. The administration is quoting EFCC seizures as some of its achievements. So how are those seizures plowed back? Under the administration of the former boss of the commission, there were also seizures made, that were quoted in the realms of billions. And every year we also talk about the return of the Abacha loot. So where are all those monies? So we must continue to ask those questions about the gains of the anti-corruption war amid the continuing conversation on the approach to fighting corruption and getting those who steal Nigeria's taxpayers' money jailed, accounting for it, and putting them behind bars, such that there would be precedent, for those who hold office. So it's an ongoing conversation, clearly.
Absolutely. So those are the front pages for you today. Some of them will definitely shape our conversation on the program this morning. The political situation in Rivers State, the state of emergency. Is it time to maybe win off the state of emergency? What is the temperature of politics like there? And of course, the security bit. So those are the front pages. We're going to show you the front pages on social media in a moment. Stay with us. So let's start off with the meeting President Bola Tinubu had yesterday. Very interesting rounds of meeting the president has been having, almost like he's paying attention to opposition figures or people who have disagreed with his policies. And, a lot of people will give anything to be a fly on the wall inside that meeting. But he had, aside the meeting with the suspended governor of Rivers State, Governor Siminalayi Fubara, he also had a meeting with Pastor Tunde Bakare. And naturally, that got a lot of people talking. Quite curious meeting. What kind of conversation did they have, particularly because just a few weeks ago, Pastor Tunde Bakare had given a review of his, of this administration, and he didn't mince words. He went all out. He broke the issues down. So one could only imagine the kind of conversation that they had at that meeting. But what is good about this is that Pastor Tunde Bakare had a conversation with the media after that meeting. So let's take a listen to what he said.
See a nation that walks in my lifetime. And those things I've discussed with Mr. President. They're not hidden things, but I've learned that when you discuss with the person in charge, you leave it with him to do whatsoever he wills with what you have suggested. So I've had a private conversation with Mr. President, and I'm glad that he received me well, and I trust that God will help our nation. I like to see a peaceful nation. I like to see Nigerians being their brother's keeper. I like to see good collaboration between the best of the North and the best of the South to steer Nigeria in the right direction. I like to see predictable progress in our nation. We have danced around some subjects for too long a time. It's time to take concrete action to ensure that the mercies of our country do not live in abject poverty.
So to put this in proper context, in April, he had said Nigeria was heading towards tyranny under President Bola Tinubu, and he made specific mention of the state of emergency in Rivers State, saying it was a theater of the absurd, saying the National Assembly had become a mere rubber stamp under President Tinubu. So one can only imagine that these things came up when they had a meeting. But guys, seeing that meeting yesterday, your thoughts?
It just to show, I like the statesmanship, the elder statesmanship in that sense. And this is what relationship should really be all about. I am a big believer in this kind of relationship. If I'm your friend and you're in government, I will be the most critical of you. Because if you misbehave, you're going to disgrace me, disgrace yourself, disgrace our family, disgrace everything that is connected to all of us, including our village and our state. I'm not a fan of sycophancy. It doesn't work for me. So I like the fact that one of the things I respect Pastor Tunde Bakare is that he will speak his mind, no matter what ox is God. From his own enlightened point of view, he spoke his mind based on what he understood and made his submission. Whether you hate him or like him, it's a different kettle of fish. And also, the president to now receive him to show that, okay, I know we may be seeing things differently, but we're not enemies in that sense. I think that's the way this should be played. It's just a conflict of ideas. And I like what he said. He said, look, as a statesman, I've done my part. I've been open about what he's doing. Now I've spoken to him privately about what he can do better, but the responsibility of action rests on him. And I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, very correct, Jeffrey. You put it rightly. And we know Pastor Tunde Bakare for speaking his mind, both from the pulpit and also at the trenches. Don't forget also that he was an active participant. In fact, he was together with the current president, the trenches during the protest against the fuel subsidy in 2012 under the Goodluck Jonathan administration. So he's an active political voice and a clerical voice, for want of better description at this point in time. So what will be the outcome of this meeting with Mr. President? That's what's critical. This open door policy must result in gains for the Nigerian people. It's a democracy, so elder statesmen should come through for Nigerians at this critical point in time, as Pastor Bakare is doing, and put the administration to task on its reforms. Where are the gains? It's a private conversation, but more importantly, we need the public outcomes of the conversations like this, and the impact on the people subsequently.
Okay, maybe we'll go to, I'm trying to catch the next one about some things happening in Enugu State. A lot has happened, some development in Enugu and all of that, but we see that there's a move by the governor to outlaw money rituals. So for those of you who are not Nigerians, this is called juju. I don't know how to explain it. So the ritual in that sense, criminal bulletproof charms, illicit spiritualist. How do you decide who is an illicit spiritualist, illegal spiritualist? It's interesting. So by what, we are journalists. It's simple on how to know we're journalists, but when it comes to the ecclesiastical, if you will, the spiritual sense of things, the extraterrestrial, I'm trying to look for the grammar that will fit this. How do you decide who is a real spiritualist? Because we must respect people's religion. There is not only Christians and Muslims that are in Nigeria, there's African traditional religion. They also have a right protected in Nigeria's constitution. It's a right they have, and they must be allowed to practice what they practice. But perhaps we have a lot of shenanigans in that space. But I'm curious to know how the state will be able to say, you're not an original spiritualist. By what he asked the Kairi.
I can explain.
Okay, explain.
First off, I'm not a part of this bill. I'm just reporting what I know. So the goal of this bill, right, is to ensure that those who practice these forms of, what did you call it again, ecclesiastical and all of that, that they are registered and regulated. So there's going to be like a registry. So I don't know how it will work. I don't know if they need a certificate.
You can't regulate religion.
Well, at least you register religious houses.
That's
so you can also register those the priests and all of that. So the goal is, by the way, the legislation is called Maintenance of Internal Security, Vigilance, and Order. Okay. So it outlaws illegal use of occupation of forest and property for criminal activities. It's quite wide-ranging. But the thorny issue is the registration and regulation of herbalists, native doctors, SNYE, those who do criminal bulletproof, money rituals, okite, charms, and the rest. It's going to be a very interesting one, particularly because we've seen events like this. But as you said, is this something you can regulate?
I would really, I don't know, because I would really like to see I'm going to make sure after the show I get a call, I get to reach them, and I want to see what the bill in its entirety looks like, because I want to see how you're going to criminalize. Because when you go to court, you're going to put up evidence. So is it your word against? Is by what parameter, by what prerequisite are you going to decipher that somebody is real or not real in terms of that? Yes, registration is fine. Everybody should be accountable. We should know we have 200 native doctors in Enugu. But how to decide which one is...
No, I think that's another thing entirely. That's left to you. Because if you look at Section 15 of the proposed legislation, it says...
I've not seen the bill for the
That's why I said I can explain, because I have some insight. It says, any person who, under the guise of spiritual or traditional practice, including but not limited to the practices commonly referred to as okite, SNYE, or any other mystical or ritual name form, administers or causes to be administered any charm, substance, or object on or for another person for the purpose of, 1, invincibility and other forms of protection to facilitate the commission of any criminal offense. So it's tied to the commission of criminal.
So this is
another one.
No, because sorry, let's take a step back. So this is a trick.
Yeah.
So the law is saying there's nothing wrong with bulletproof charm. That is what that law you just read said. There's nothing wrong with bulletproof charm. But if you now give bulletproof charm to an armed robber
to commit a crime,
this is going to be interesting.
It will be. But that's not all. Because I won't take the rest.
Yes, there's another one. Any person who falsely claims to possess supernatural powers or misleads the public into believing so for the purpose of gaining reward or influence, whether financially or otherwise, commits an offense and shall be liable on conviction to imprisonment for a term of 3 years or a fine of not less than 3 million naira. You know, as we say, wisdom is known by her children. So the law is not particularly frowning on the use of supernatural powers or African traditional religion in itself, but the negative outcomes of it. And, you know, to put this in proper context, This is coming right after the arrest by the Nigerian Immigration Service, by the way, of the suspected ritualist Levi Obieze, who was handed over to the Lagos Police Command because he was fleeing Enugu State and he was nabbed on the border to Benin Republic, Badagry area to be precise. And we know that in his shrine, so to speak, decomposing bodies were discovered, and he's also being fingered for the kidnapping of a 13-year-old girl who was, by the way, rescued not too long ago. So perhaps it's the outcomes of this that the state government is trying to regulate. And we also know that we have a problem on our hands as far as ritualist is concerned, the use of their powers, so to speak, to multiply or get people to become wealthy. Those are the real issues behind this. But the relative part of it, well, Jeffrey, you are the one that has the insights.
I agree that something should be done about excesses, but the language, because I don't know what the judge is going to do about this. When
Let's try it first.
Falsely claims to possess any person who falsely claims to possess supernatural powers. So who is the arbiter? Who is going to decide that the person
is simple? You can prove these things. You say you can disappear, right? All right, disappear. If you can't, that's a lie. You say you have bulletproof. All right, no problem.
We'll shoot you.
Are you okay? Do you want us to try it? If it doesn't work, maybe just try the leg. I'm not calling for violence, but just to prove these things. And if it doesn't work, that's proof enough. So I think it's something we should explore. Certainly, but
it's going to be tough in court. It's going to be very tough.
Somebody I know always says that we all have witchcraft powers, or the powers of the metaphysical, so to speak. Even the Caucasians, the Western world, that we aspire to be like, and we always quote their technological advancement. The person I know says they have the witchcraft powers as well, but the black power is used for negative purposes. So perhaps we should call
for
good.
We have to.
We have a lot of problems.
I think we need to bring the authorities in Enugu State to come and explain.
Because, and then bring representatives.
Yes, because at the end of the day, to be very fair, because I'm talking about law, constitution, ground norm. I'm a Christian. I love my faith. But if it's the law that respects everybody at that sense, as much as they know what they are doing and they want to achieve something, just the example you gave. It's not every time the pastor is in the anointing zone to heal the sick.
Well, this is a conversation to have.
Let's call on the wise to deploy their powers to solve problems of insecurity, for instance. And you know whether whether the state governments at that level would not get an interest.
Let us know what you think. Obviously, this is a thorny issue. Let us know what you think. Our emails
is a good
there, and our WhatsApp message. Is this a way to go, particularly because we've seen a lot of nefarious activities being committed under the guise of herbalist, Izawai, and the rest. But away from Nigeria, another issue that has been causing quite a stir is this, would I call it love lost? Well, it's hard to tell, really, between billionaire, the richest man in the world, by the way, Elon Musk, and President Donald Trump of America. So Elon Musk put out this tweet, and it got a lot of people curious. Yes, he's been talking about his experience at Doge and how, when you get into government, you begin to see things and it shocks you. So he's referring to this bill, which, by the way, President Donald Trump calls a beautiful bill. But this particular bill, the tax and spending bill, has come under intense scrutiny by Elon Musk. The Congress has passed it, but at the Senate, it has hit a brick wall. So Elon Musk put out this tweet saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't stand it anymore. The massive, outrageous, and
pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting
abomination.
heavy words there.
So when he says pork field, and this is part of the point, first, it's okay to disagree. I think some people take friendship or political alliances too far. So when you see something wrong, you don't speak. You just hush, hush. No. If you think it is wrong, you can absolutely speak. Because the president has said time and again that there's no issue between him and Elon Musk. But he saw this bill and he thinks it doesn't make sense, particularly because of the money that we try to cut at Doge. It doesn't make sense to now pour this money again and waste it and increase our budget spending. But you see that pork field and debt as well. You see the pork field part would interest some people. He's not talking about pork, actually. So pork in the U.S. is another term used for constituency projects in that sense. The lawmakers also have projects in their constituencies.
So it's not only Nigeria. So
it's not only Nigeria. So that's what he's referring to with the pork field statement.
There's a background to this, you know. Just days ago, he resigned from the Trump administration, and that got a lot of people talking because it was a key part of the campaign ahead of Trump's comeback to the White House. And he was, you know, appointed to be a part of the efficiency, in terms of financial expenditure of the administration. And he led staff cuts. So the fallout started prior to this time. And what impact this will have on the administration. You know President Trump for who he is. I doubt very much that he will be missed in that sense. President Trump goes ahead to execute his plan. And he says what he promises to do, even from references to his last time as president of the United States of America. But it's clearly it's ongoing, and we'll see how it turns out.
The thing I want to say with this issue is the lesson that everybody who is a politician in Nigeria should learn. Sometimes it's not because you're the person's enemy. It's just that if you see something really bad, in your view, speak out your mind. It's not just because Elon Musk is rich. He's talking about this tax cuts and all of this debt ceiling that will be broken and more debts. I think I've forgotten the figure. But it just felt like all the work we came to do in Doge, are we reversing? Where are we going to in the long term with all of this? But Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America, the most powerful nation in the world. He has his hands full. He knows for him what he's doing. But that doesn't stop people like Elon Musk to say, I don't think this is why we brought you in here. And I'm not going to shy away from telling you the truth. So I'm saying that some of the sycophancy we see in our polity here, there's nothing wrong. It doesn't make you the enemy of the governor or the enemy of the president as a party man. Because Nigeria's definition of party man is whether the person is doing nonsense, I'm a party man, I'll defend the nonsense. No, it doesn't work like that. You're not a patriot for doing that. So do your best to stand up and defend the people of Nigeria, but you also you have your allegiance to the person in power. That's the best way.
Jeffrey, it also shows the beauty of democracy, really, and the integrity of an individual, to resign honorable from a government that they have disagreed with. But that is not what we see in these parts. It is very rare, for a professional to see something wrong in government and then, choose the honorable path by exiting the administration.
I like that. I like that Bukola's bit. I just remember that if he's Nigeria, the guy will be thinking of his business. What if they come after my business?
But we've seen ministers resign in Nigeria. I recall a certain minister of finance.
There's only one I remember that resigned.
Yes.
No, I remember Minister of Power.
Yeah, Minister of Finance also resigned.
Who was that?
But what we're saying is that it is the exception rather than the rule in these parts.
Yes. We've seen a lot of people resign. We've seen people get appointment and they say, I'm sorry, I can't take it, or work in it for a while and resign as well, but not as much, certainly. So something to chew on. Right? Something to chew on. We just wanted to give you a sense of some of the happenings, the trending issues across board. The budget deficit, yes, 2.5 trillion. That's what this will push it to. Dollars, by the way. We'll take a quick break.
That's a dream come true. That's like almost a GDP. We're close to the GDP of Africa.
We'll take a quick break now. And when we return, we'll be speaking to the issues in River State. Don't forget, you can be a part of the show as well on WhatsApp and via email. The state of emergency in River State, about 3 months now. How far so far? Is it safe to have the governor return, or should we continue on this trail? We'll find out in a moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back. It's still your perfect morning starter right here on Channels Television. And the first leg of our conversation will be focusing on Rivers State, particularly coming on the heels of that meeting of the suspended governor, Sim Fubara, with Mr. President Bola Tinubu. Of course, prior to that time, as we referred to earlier, there had been reports, some say mostly unconfirmed, that the suspended governor had met with Mr. President outside the country, and he has in fact also met with his former boss, former governor Nyesom Wike. So it's 3 months after the declaration, nearly now, of a state of emergency in Rivers State. How close are we to the resolution of that state of emergency? Because in the approval of the National Assembly, there was a clause to the effect that it can be reviewed before the initial 6 months. So what are the other meetings going on behind the scene? This morning, let's have this conversation. And we have joining us right here in our Lagos studio, Professor Okaba Benjamin. He is the president, Ijaw Nation, and he's here, as I said, in our Lagos studio. Good morning, Professor Okaba. Thank you so much for coming through, for being early, and for waiting.
Thank you very much for having me. Actually, the president of Ijaw National Congress worldwide.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay. President, Ijaw National Congress worldwide.
Thank you
so
much.
One of the sticking points, of this whole scenario is what some would say the seeming inconsistency of the suspended governor of Rivers State, because we had seen that there were reports that he had met with his predecessor and former boss, Nyesom Wike, where he was said to have been genuflecting and pleading. And then we heard him also saying on another platform that his mind has left there. Do you think I want to return? Quoting him now. So where does this all lead after that, because he has met with Mr. President again?
Okay. I don't see any element of inconsistency in all of that. When a man says, my mind has even left there, is to display the fact that he's not desperate. It's unlike other politicians that want to do everything. And for us, we consider that as a purely political statement. He's not there by his own will and interest. He has to continue as governor, to serve as his term, because Rivers people voted for him and they still need him. So it is not a decision that is left for him alone. And that is our way, because we have interacted with him after those statements were made, and the clear explanations that were given, that I'm not desperate, it's not a duo and die affair. If tomorrow, by the will of God, I'm no longer governor, I will not kill anybody. Everyone will not fall. That is the clear demonstration of allowing God to take over everything. Now, talking about the meetings, we actually expected them. The one in London, the one in Lagos, and several others. In fact, the president has done so much by way of sending emissaries to talk to both parties to ensure that peace returns, normalcy returns to Rivers State and to our democracy. He has done a lot, and he has also reached out to so many persons, including myself, because as president of Ijaw National Congress, we were not happy with the declaration of the state of emergency. We saw it as unnecessary, unconstitutional, unlawful, and a dent on the democratic credentials of Mr. President. We felt the allegations against Fubara were unfounded. I also felt he was giving tacit support to one particular character, and it was not actually fair to Fubara. But again, we had a lot of explanations that all that the president did was in the interest of Rivers State, though we doubted all of that. But again, it is possible the president saw what we did not see. And when he also now reached out to people, leaders of Ijaw Nation, to say, please, just give me some trust. we decided to, okay, let's give him a benefit of doubt. And to be very frank, we have seen from his body language and some utterances and engagement that ultimately it's about prioritizing peace and development of Rivers State. One interesting component of it is that this 3 months or thereabout period has actually exposed a lot. So many hypotheses have been put to test as to one, who is the leader of Rivers State. If we have election in 2027, who will take charge? Who are the Rivers people loyal to? Then issues of betrayal, loyalty, backstabbing, irresponsibility of some persons and all that. Many lies that were told that even necessitated, in quote, the imposition of the state of emergency have been so cleared.
So who is the leader in Rivers State now?
The governor is the leader.
The governor is the leader?
Yes, he is the leader of Rivers State.
So do you see anything to the...
Political leader?
Yeah, political leader of Rivers State. He is.
All right. So do you see anything to the permutations that he may be planning to defect to the APC?
No, what is wrong about that? There's nothing wrong about that. Because if a former vice presidential candidate of a party defects...
Yeah, there's nothing wrong, but you need to look at the optics. So the optics could be that he was coerced, and this was part of the... I'm just saying optics.
Okay, yes, optics, okay.
Yes, he was coerced into... I'm twisted in that sense, that this was the only way out, because we've heard all kinds of things, you know. One of the arguments has always been, when somebody, quote and unquote, let me use a political term, I made you, in that sense. Yes. Nobody can debate to the effect the role Nyesom Wike played. I don't think that's debatable.
No, not at all.
And so the issue of leadership becomes contentious. By the party's laws and all of that, of course, the governor is in that sense. So I know that there's also that debate as to who is really the active leader, but that's not even where I'm going to. Yeah. Let's talk about that optics of if he chooses to now join the APC, which he has a right to, nothing stops him. Wouldn't that send you talked about denting the democratic credentials of the president. Isn't that going to further dent? Because it looks like this is the only way, this was one of the ways or the condition to have brought in peace into the state.
You know, at this point, we must be realistic. We must have an understanding of the character of the Nigerian politics. I summarized this in a lecture I gave recently. We operate a malutocracy. A malutocracy.
What does that mean?
It means that just like you lead malus, you say, move this way and you move this. We don't have political parties anymore in the sense of it. We have platforms for political contestation.
But if you say this, why then are you holding the position also that there is nothing wrong with the governor defecting to the APC?
No, that is the point I'm making, right? We don't have platforms. We don't have political parties. Sorry, we don't have political parties. What we have is just some kind of platforms that are put together for people to transmit or escalate from one position to the other. So if we have state governors, formal presidential, vice presidential candidates of parties, just moving on, to the extent that even one of the governors even said, if you don't move with me, I will sack you. So there are no ideological events and all that. I had a conversation with a former state party chairman, and I asked him, you've also moved from PDP to this? He said, yes. Okay, what is the first item in schedule this of your party? He said he doesn't know. He does not even have a copy of the party. So what I'm trying to say is that in the interest of peace, Fobara made a statement that he would do anything to bring back peace in the state. And I don't see it as, Nigerians don't see it as a serious issue that people are defecting, or maybe tomorrow, even Tinubu himself, if he decides to defect to PDP, because that he finds that as a veritable platform for him to contest another. It's not a serious matter.
Isn't that worrying for you? as an intellectual, as a scholar,
yes,
as a Nigerian? What kind of society are we building when,
yes,
I don't think all of them put together, I will check that figure, I don't think there are more than 30,000. President, governors, all their commissioners, ministers, local government chairmen, councillors, I don't think there are more than 30,000. If we have this quote-unquote contraption of platforms where people can just walk in and out, what kind of society are we building? Doesn't that bother you? This is beyond the conversation of Fubara and Wiki.
No, that is exactly why I coined the word that is worrisome, right? It's very, very worrisome. But again, we must also understand the reality why we are pursuing the ideal. The ideal that we should have political parties that are built on conviction, on ideologies, and we are ready to define. We had such at the First and Second Republic. In fact, political parties even transcended into becoming movements. We have Awoism, right? We have Zikism, you know, that people, if ran down to the villages, were proud to belong. But today, what are you to hold on to, right? That is where we are. That is how we are so degenerated. And that is why loyalty is not to the state. Loyalty is not to development. Loyalty is not to the people. Loyalty is to the person that provides the platform.
Right.
That is how bad it is. So, and in that situation, when I say if Fubara decides to move to APC, right, I don't see that as an issue in the scenario we find ourselves.
Okay.
But normally we'll have asked the question, why are you moving? We have the case of somebody who has been in the House of Representatives for about 28 years. He's also defected. 28 years in a party, in the House of Reps from the onset, and you're also defecting to APC. For what?
So it looks like the APC is increasingly looking like the PDP, because it looks like home. If I leave the PDP to the APC, I still see the faces that were in the PDP
no,
anyway. Of course. So I'm going there. But the question is, when you now get there, what will he meet? How will he function there? Because he will still meet the FCT minister there in one way or the other. Right? I mean, let's be factual.
Yes,
you will still meet him there one way or the other. Yes. The structure in the state of the APC, there is that one that is loyal to the FCT minister. In the state, that is. So when people look at the optics and they look at the permutation and say, it's going to be tough. It's like it's between the devil and the deep blue sea. Decision has to be made. But is that really the best decision for you?
There are things I cannot say make public. But because I've been involved in the dynamics of engaging both APC leaders, PDP leaders and all that, I think it's in his best interest. I will not say give the reason, but it is the interest of Fubara and the state. Fubara needs protection from some persons, and those persons must also be very powerful. As powerful as I don't know how to classify the other person, as powerful as whoever.
As the principalities and powers,
yes,
think.
Yes. He also needs
protection for his life?
Yes, yes. Not just his life, his office. He needs people to protect his office. He needs people to be loyal to. Like I said earlier, it's about personalities. You have people, whether rightly or wrongly, claim to be close to some principalities and powers. And I say, well, if you want us to deal with this individual, come join us. We had your little power to my big power. Right?
I hope they're not lying to him.
No, the question is that everything is risky. And if you don't take, it's risky not to take risk.
Is it also risky to resign?
It's risky to also resign. Because if he resigns today, the totality of his political career is gone. People will say he has shaken out. He had made effort to resign early in the administration. There was, at some point, he actually said, look, I want to resign. These are not the things I actually plan to do. And those in power called him and said, no, we brought you in for a particular purpose. You don't resign. It's not about you. It's no longer about you, Fubara. It's about Rivers people. It's about the interest of the job people, still you remain. You understand that? So if he resigns, we say he has shaken up. And tomorrow, nobody will take him serious. Because the political atmosphere in this country is dirty.
But hold on, Jeffrey.
Yes.
The more important question now is, do Rivers people want a governor whose heart is not in the job? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, you said the defection is not, there's nothing wrong, or it's the ideal way to go under the circumstances, or the biggest sacrifice that can be made, so to speak. But is that the political direction that the Rivers people also want to go at this point in time?
The Rivers, what the Rivers people want by any means is that their governor returns.
Whether it's in the APC or in the PDP?
Well, that is immaterial. Because party differences don't matter anymore in this country. That is why people could flex from one party to the other and come back and all that. If you can categorize persons who have actually migrated to and fro 3-4 parties. What is important that for Rivers people, for Ijaw people, I can speak for Ijaw people, is that we have a governor of Ijaw extraction, and let it continue and do its job. We also let it come back, and that is why you saw the demonstration of the Rivers women, right, in solidarity of Similari Fobra, right, all to show that come back, because the reason for the imposition of the state of emergency kind of to a lot of people, right, in fact, has not shown any, there was no rationale for that. Because you talk about the peace, Rivers State is peaceful. There were some elements of provocation. Those who orchestrated all of this said some people claim that if this happened, they're going to blow pipeline and all that. Right. And when there were some cases of infrastructure invasion, we, the job people, said, no, go do thorough investigation. And I think it was owned up that that was a coincidence, kind of. And again, let me just make this point. There are persons who don't want the state of emergency to be lifted, kind of. There are some persons who want to paint the picture that Fobra must not return for so many reasons. In fact, at some point, when certain things were not working the way they wanted, because they expected sporadic destruction of pipeline and all that. And we spoke to our people. This is a trap. It's a boo-boo trap. In the first place, we have gone beyond the era of busting of pipelines and all that. If you want to seek self-determination, you can do that without even raising a gun, a bullet. With a pen, you can have self-determination. And again, destroying is about destroying our own environment. Yes. So what we're saying is that at times when we even made to have this escalate into Bayelsa State, you remember, I remember all of that and all that. And, we said, no, this will not happen.
Prof, I'm happy that the rhetoric is toning down.
Yes.
All the fireworks we've seen seem to be, for me, we have a position on whatever that has to do with the Constitution. Yes. Let the Supreme Court do their work. Yeah. We hope they do their work to the best of their ability. However, the most important thing is to bring back peace. But there's a question that has always been on my mind.
Okay.
2 questions, but I'll ask one because of time. Is the Ijaw nation concerned about their political position in the state of affairs, especially in leadership of all the Ijaw states, or all the states where we have Ijaws?
Yes.
Melford Okilo did not complete his tenure as, of course, it was 1 term because of military coup.
Yeah.
Ada George, remember that story as well. And now, I think the first Ijaw man that completed a 2-term, 8 years, for 4 years, in the history of Ijaw nation is Seriake Dixon.
Yeah.
The second is going to be Doye Diri. What is it with the Ijaw people and the inability to be able to complete a term, 2 terms? Have you sat down to look at it, Prof?
Yes, of course. We've taken a curious evaluation of all of that. And that was why, in the case of Seriake Dixon, we're very conscious and deliberate that he has to complete his tenure. there are so many external and internal factors responsible for the issues you just mentioned. But again, we decided to deal with the internal, believing that if we are cohesive, right, those external factors will not come in. That is the point. Then, also, you need to also recall that that for over 24 years, thereabout, a job man or somebody from the riverine never tested the governorship of Rivers State, you know, for some reasons. And,
since 1999.
Yes. So, that is why every right-thinking job person is standing behind FOBRA. That zinc has to be broken.
So is it now time to win off the state of emergency? Do you think now would be a good time?
Yes. No, in fact, like I said, the state of emergency was actually not necessary in the first place. So we've tried it for 3 months, and we've seen that instead of improving on the state of affairs of Rivers State, things are degenerating.
But some would say that we've not seen the brickbats, the drums of war, all of those heated atmosphere. We've not seen that.
No, let me tell you, I'm the president of Ijaw National Congress. And for the reactions of Ijaw people, right, I'm the commanding officer, right? And I said right from the beginning that there were some promptings that if we do this, they will blow pipelines. If they do this, we are going to do this. We calculated that these things are already planned. Do we fall into them? And we said no. We said no, we won't fall into them. And particularly because I said there will be consequences. I made those statements. If this happens, there will be consequences. And people were leveraging on that statement to put in place. In fact, there were occasions where a fellow job man said I should be arrested because I was trying to instigate this and all that. Now, but we felt no. Let us deal with it, utilizing the mechanism of constructive engagement, and we did. We deployed that. Do you get the point?
Yeah, so, I do. So you're basically saying that you have decided to hold off and not play into that trap.
Yes.
So speak to us about then the condition for lifting the state of emergency. I know there are different permutations. You've spoken to that. Some of them you've not shared because they are private conversations. Yes. So should it be first Governor Fubara joins the APC and then we lift the state of emergency so you return to governor, or let's lift the state of emergency first and then you can now join the APC afterwards?
In addition, the issue of second term.
Yeah. Is that off the table too?
For us, I don't know what conditions should come first. If he decides to join the APC today and the state of emergency is lifted, good. If the state of emergency is lifted and he returns and joins the APC, it's also good. The ultimate is that it gets back to office.
Before June 12th?
Before June 12th.
Is that the plan? Yes. To get him back to office?
Yes, no, that is our expectation. In fact, we are not, I will not say we are urging Mr. President. We also know that the President knows what to do. It's not like we are urging him. The President will do the right thing. Yes. And we also know that people are even fighting the President for this is disposition. Some persons have even come out publicly to say that if their permission were actually sought before that, they will have rejected the state of emergency offer. You understand the point? So they are not happy that this, and that is why in recent times you can see some desperate efforts that are put in place to blackmail, to show that the man is a betrayal, is an incompetent person. But Mr. President has a responsibility over all Nigerians to separate personal idiosyncrasies and the good of the state. He has seen, President has learned a lot. So also Fubara has also learned a lot with these experiences, right? But Mr. President will do the needful by lawfully restoring peace and harmony and development in Rivers State. And that can only happen if very, very quickly he brings us Fubara
And just to quickly ask, to confirm, is the suspended governor also reaching out to state assembly members? You know, that was one of the conditions of peace that the former governor gave.
They've been talking.
So he's not going to have a problem with the state assembly when he returns to office?
Of course, they are the same people. They are the same people. And we believe that without reaching out to them, right, there will be a problem.
Prof, at the end of the day, I think it feels like we will never know what the problem is.
No,
Prof, do you know what the problem is?
I know what the problem is.
Would you like to share?
I will
because
share,
Nigerians would like to know.
I will share part of it.
Okay, that's the problem.
No, okay, don't worry. I will tell you the much I know, right? Or I want to tell you. It is about state capture. It's about state capture. That is the problem. One individual thinks that he has done well, so well, and that he must remain in charge. And we have said no. The governor, by our political calculation and explanation, is like a culture. Whoever becomes governor becomes the head of the place. Whoever becomes president becomes the leader of the party of the state.
All right.
Yes, you understand that.
So state capture is ambiguous. But
no, when I'm not
going to ask you to explain it.
State capture.
It's a continuing conversation. We must thank you at this point, Prof. We're totally out of time. But
we have templates anyway.
Productive.
We have templates.
Yes, it's been a productive conversation. Professor Okaba Benjamin is the president, Ijaw National Congress worldwide. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming through on this important conversation.
Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Amen. And you too, sir. So there's more to come on the program. Don't forget, we have that critical conversation on electoral reform, and there's also the security challenge, that border fence that is being proposed by the CDS. How fast will it come, and what will it take for it to come? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Let's move away from issues around politics and talk about the generality of the policy. But this time we're talking security. There's been a lot of concerns. The carnage on the plateau, the carnage in Benue, the killings in Borno, the killings in Taraba, the kidnappings in part of the south. We can just go on and list some of the challenges we have. And we understand that one of the major issues is that there are foreign invaders encroaching into our borders and wreaking havoc in that sense, killing our people, and we're quite familiar with what is going on. But the Chief of Defense Staff the other day made a statement that got a lot of people talking and got everybody curious. He gave examples of countries where, as part of measures to restore peace and order in their country, they had to build walls around their borders. And he gave dimensions. And he's saying that maybe that is the right way to go for Nigeria. So the big question is, should Nigeria be contemplating building borders? How will this help the issue of insecurity in parts of the country? Being joined in the program to explore this, the men who understand how security works in Nigeria and around the world. Mr. Kabiru Adamu is a security risk management expert and the MD Beacon Security Intelligence Limited. Also joining us is Major Adebayo Adeleke. He's a retired immigrant U.S. Army officer, human security expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
All right, let me start with you, Mr. Adamu. And I'm going to ask the same question to both of you, just your overview of that comment by the CDS. So the question is that the way to go, building walls around our border?
Yeah, so I was at the event where he made that comment. It was an event organized by the Voice of Nigeria to support citizens' engagement. And the Chief of Defense Staff reeled out the several security challenges in the country. And in talking about measures to address those challenges, he mentioned the need to have constructive fence, as it were, across our borders. He didn't go into the how. But then, I asked myself, the border that we have, the length of the border is about 4,477 kilometers. and that's the land border. And there are about 4 countries thereabout. The one that concerns me is Niger, which has about 1,497 kilometers of shared border with Nigeria, and then Cameroon, which has 1,690 kilometers of shared border in Nigeria. Now, across these shared borders are forests, rivers, savanna, mountains, deserts. And then so I now asked myself, when the US constructed a border between the United States and Mexico, how much did it construct that border? Now, estimates suggest between $2 million to $5 million.
Is there a reason why?
Dollars per kilometer of that fence. So if you now multiply that by the 4,407, we're talking of about between $9 billion US dollars to $22 billion US dollars to construct such a fence. Now, it tells me that first, it will be very difficult for Nigeria to, get that amount. And remember that this does not include maintenance. It doesn't include surveillance technology that will be required on the fence. It also does not include the environmental mitigation that may be necessary when you are constructing such a wall or a fence across the border. So budget feasibility would be a challenge. And then the construction across this forest, rivers, savannas, mountains, desert would also be a huge challenge. And even if, for instance, the construction takes place, what is going to stop the bad guys from coming to bomb places along the fence? And then, of course, we're back to where we are. So these are some of the considerations for me at the beginning. There are other components that perhaps in the course of the conversation we can explore, such as the effectiveness of the wall, if at all it is constructed, and then the consequences on our diplomatic relationships with our neighbors, as well as the cultural impact it will have, given the closeness between certain communities within the border area.
All right, Major Adeleke, your quick take on this issue of building walls around our border.
Thank you and good morning. And it's a pleasure actually speaking here. And Mr. Adamu, we've chatted a few times, but we've never really met one-on-one. So when I read the news that the Chief of Defense Staff made this comment, I'm not shocked at all. General Chris Musa is quite intelligent and a very solid army officer, so I know exactly where he's coming from. Because if you look at the threat analysis of Nigeria, majorly a lot of the fighters that we see in Nigeria are coming, they are external to Nigeria. So I understand the need for this war to be constructed. And if you look at the historical context as well, is it the Great War of China? Is it the Berlin War? Is it the Durand Line that was mentioned in the Pakistan and Afghanistan borderline, which I'm quite familiar, especially in Speed Bulldog and all these areas. I'm quite familiar with that. And also with the one with Saudi as well. I understand all these construction, even the United States as well, because the United States is doing it for something else, but the use of fence or wall to kind of mitigate inflow of people into certain country has been used is an age-long methodology. So there's a pros and cons to it as well. But in the Nigerian context, and we can actually relate what General Chris Musa is actually insinuating with that of with that of Pakistan and Afghanistan, which that was actually occurring during what we call the Pashtun land. If you've ever been that area, you understand exactly what I'm talking about, because the same set of tribes is actually found in Afghanistan and also in Pakistan. And the same thing, I think we can be likened to what we might see in Nigeria, because most of our borders, especially in northern part of Nigeria, actually they have the same community across the board. The thing about borders, the reason about using fences and wall is that it's a tactical solution to a structural and strategic problems. It can deter, it stands as a deterrent for a while, and after that it becomes an issue. So I understand in the meantime to hold the line, but at what cost? As Mr. Adamu said, is the cost of constructing these fences, depending on what kind of construction you go to, with the barbed wires or what of real wall. And particularly, war in this dispensation cannot stand alone. It's not a standalone solution. It has to be accompanied with governance. So you cannot substitute war for for security governance. And also, actually, what I took out of this conversation that General Chris Musa made is a larger conversation about security architecture, our national security architecture in Nigeria, because a lot of this security burden has been put on the shoulders of Nigerian military. And I think the Ministry of Interior and every other ministry out there also share a line of effort when it comes to the issue of security. So you cannot talk about the ungoverned spaces in these porous borders of Nigeria without talking about the effort that's been done by the Ministry of Interior and also the other security architecture within Nigeria. I think that's a larger question, or the bigger question we need to be asking ourselves, not only from the military side of for the how, but also what are the other ministries doing? What are the customs doing? What are the Ministry of Interior doing to mitigate the inflows of fighters from foreign countries to Nigeria? But it is if it is done, it's going to be damn expensive. More importantly, because Nigeria has a lot of high priority, and I think this particular one will be very hard to pass. But more importantly, it's a short-term solution for a larger strategic problem.
Well, I wonder it's not also, if this proposal is not also intelligence to the men of questionable character who are accessing Nigeria through those porous borders. But that's another subject for another day. What's more important is the size of the boots on the ground. And just days ago on our platform, the Chief of Naval Staff was talking about inadequate manpower within the naval part of the armed forces, 30,000. And it seems this is a continuing conversation that is leading, making very little progress, that Nigeria seems to be making very little progress on. Mr. Adamu, do you think that this is a fallout of having a technocrat, or if you like, a politician, in the office of the Ministry of Defense, rather than, a man of the armed forces, which was part of the conversation at the time of the constituting of the cabinet of the administration? Mr. Adamu.
Of the regulatory body, in this instance, the Ministry of Defense, and more importantly, the Ministry of Interior, because border, the agency that is primarily responsible for border management, which is the Immigration Service, is actually under the Ministry of Interior. So maybe our focus should be on the Ministry of Interior and not necessarily on the Ministry of Defense. But having said that, both ministries should have the capacity for regulatory oversight of the agencies under them. And I think that is one of the gray areas in our current conversation when we are looking at the security architecture. I always like reminding us that there are 29 ministries, departments, and agencies that are responsible for security in Nigeria. Each of them has a crucial role to play. And when we downplay that role, then we now see gaps. If we shift the responsibility of all the 25 on the 4 that are under the military, as it were, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, and to an extent the intelligence wing of the defense wing, then the other 25, frankly, this 4 cannot do the work of the 25. So it is with this eye, with this prism, that I'm kind of responding to your question. Yes, the capacity of the Ministry of Defense for regulatory oversight of the military is absolutely important, but what is even more important is the regulatory capacity of the Ministry of Interior on the agency that has primary responsibility for border management, and that is the Immigration Service, as well as, to an extent, the customs. Now, when you bring all of them together, then we may now start seeing results. Of course, we need more boots on the ground, but those boots are more immigration boots and then more customs boots. The military can support, perhaps because of the nature of the threat that we're dealing with. It is terrorism, and no civil or paramilitary organization can counter such a threat. The military must come in to support that, but once the military kind of creates the environment, then these other agencies must take over and carry out that function. The second part of my response will be the role of the National Assembly, the committees of the National Assembly, both in the House of Rep and in the Senate, that have responsibility for oversight for these organizations, defense and interior. They have a crucial role to play, both in budgeting as well as operational oversight. And so it's only when we bring all of this together that we may now start seeing the results that we aspire for.
All right, Mr. Adeleke, I wonder if you have additional response to the same question. But in addition to that, in your own estimation, by how much percentage will the construction of fences around the borders solve the insecurity challenge?
It's hard to say because you have to look at the geographical features. Geography is destiny. So look at that particular point in time, what they are trying to do, in what area, what's the intelligence saying, in what inflows. But as I always say, the enemy also has a vote in this. As you are constructing the war, they also looking at the ways to exploit the wars as well. We've seen this in the American and Mexican war as well. So just to echo what Mr. Adamu said, and I think I've said this on this particular show and many others, is the fact that, and I'm going further than Mr. Adamu on this, all MDAs in Nigeria has a line of effort towards security. And because a lot of all these MDAs have kind of reneged on their responsibility, everything falls on the shoulder of the military, either the kinetic or non-kinetic efforts. And all these things are all encompassing to solve some of this problem. The Ministry of Interior has a larger role to play in border management on the governed spaces of Nigeria. And unfortunately, until assessment is made, what part of the border, I don't think, realistically, because it's going to be a programmatic spending. Every time you make such a permanent structure, you have to, figure out in the budget every time, how to maintain the technological requirement of it. And do we have the critical infrastructure to support this border management as well? Those are the questions that is left for decision makers, policy makers, and also the lawmakers as well to make. But the lives we've lost, does it equate to the amount of money we're going to be spending? Those are the questions that most Nigerians and also the lawmakers have to make as well. But to answer your question categorically, it's going to be very hard to tell because, I don't have the raw intelligence of where these foreign fighters are coming in and where there is a need for the border for these fences to be made. But regardless, make no mistake that regardless of how far or how long the fences are, if people have intention of coming across your borders, they will. And places like, Pakistan and Pakistan and Afghanistan, despite the fact that, the Duran line, extended from that out to China, people are still using Tora Bora and Spin Bulldog, to actually, or Springer rather, to actually enter Afghanistan. So they don't mind the unforgiving terrain of Tora Bora. They're still finding a way to go over there. So if people are really determined actually to fight and to become a nefarious actor, they will find a way across those borders. So that is why the non-kinetic efforts of all these MDAs is necessary to actually solve these problems. Because again, those border construction cannot be the solution, standalone solution to solve the transnational militants that we find ourselves in.
Let me go to Dr. Adamu. Well, the question has now been, are we trying to keep them in or deter them from coming in? Because to a large extent, a lot of these terrorists are already in within our borders, right? So what is going to be, or what do you suggest will be the strategy? Do we get them out first, then build a wall to keep them from coming in? Or to build the wall, understanding that a lot of them are in already, then find a way to get them out? I don't know if you catch my drift here, Dr. Adamu.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and I'm hoping that the strategy would be, hybrid, as it were, a combination of the beauty of our situation in Nigeria, which unfortunately is also the failure of the MDAs that have responsibility for security. We already have beautiful instruments. I'll quickly mention them. We have the National Counterterrorism Strategy. We have the policy framework on countering violent extremism. We also have a few other, associated instruments, but these two are the major ones for addressing. Now, they recognize the fact that we have internal, homegrown, as it were, terrorists, and as well as external terrorists who come in. So if only we would implement this instrument fully, I don't think we would be sitting here, having this conversation about the construction of offenses. Yes, it is one of the considerations to reduce the influx of terrorists into the country. But then this was envisaged a long time ago, and perhaps if we had implemented these instruments, we would not be where we are. In terms of consideration for the instruments and what they've mentioned, they've talked about targeted physical barriers in high-risk zones. So, for instance, constructing fences in locations where we already know through intelligence that there is a crisscrossing. A good example would be around the Lake Chad Basin, where we know that ISWAP, the Islamic State in West Africa province, already has a base there in the islands on the Lake Chad. Another one is the Mandara Mountains in the border area between Cameroon and Nigeria. So examples, I can go on and on of targeted physical barriers in some of those locations. The second consideration in our instruments is smart surveillance and drones, satellite imaging, sensors, and recently AI to monitor activities and movement. There is enough technology. Believe me, if you put graduates of certain courses in a room, 20 of them, they would come up with different solutions to assist all of these components of smart surveillance. The third one is border force reform. We've talked about the Nigeria Immigration Service, the customs. The one we haven't mentioned is to reduce corruption, both in terms of the operation of these organizations, as well as the other associated regulatory bodies that supervise these organizations. And then, of course, we've mentioned increasing boots on ground. And then, of course, the last one is the cross-border security pacts. We must expand the security pacts among ECOWAS member states, and recently with the advent of the AES, the Sahelian states, we must also expand the cross-border pacts between us, either bilaterally or multilaterally. And then, of course, the operations of the multinational joint task force, and then, of course, the AU framework for joint operations. Now, all of these are already in this instrument that I mentioned. So it's really about implementation. Once it is implemented, it would address the internal terrorists that we have, as well as the external terrorists that perhaps may want to come in. If we do construct the wall, yes, it would help all of these 4 points that I've mentioned. But just like my co-discussant mentioned, it is only a strategic advent. It would not solve the problem if we do not, do these other things that I've mentioned.
So do we chase them out first and build a wall?
We can.
Or do we
so the thing
build a
about
wall by the fact they're here?
Yeah, the thing about terrorism, you can't chase them out. It's ideological. And that is why I didn't go into the details of the instruments that I mentioned, but the instruments recognizes the need for instance, counter-radicalization. It recognizes the need for de-radicalization. It recognizes the need for the soft approach in terms of our economic viability, livelihoods. Remember that when you're dealing with counter-terrorism, there are three elements, as it were, three groups. You've got the government authorities, you've got the bad guys, the terrorists, and then you have influence over us as a people. So this instrument recognizes that, and what the instruments try to do is to reduce the influence that the terrorists would have. So it's not really about chasing them out, but about reducing the capacity for the terrorists to have influence over the local population through de-radicalization, through economic empowerment, through counter-radicalization operations, and then, of course, the kinetic component that we have. At the end of the day, once we reduce the influence, and more importantly, suffocate the terrorist groups through denying them the oxygen that they use in breathing. And what is this oxygen? Their ability to generate funding. We can discuss this extensively. Their ability to acquire weaponry, both internally and externally. And then, of course, their ability to recruit new members. And I've mentioned some of the ways to do that. So really, this is how to address the terrorism challenge. It's not really about chasing them away. If you chase them away, they will still come back.
Okay. Let's take it to Major Adeleke as we begin to wind down. And this is just beyond the conversation around Nigeria, Africa. So if you look at Nigeria, bordered by maybe 4 countries, Chad somewhere, Niger, Cameroon, I think Benin Republic. But we just saw the visa ban by the United States government on about 10 countries. 7 of them are African countries. And a partial ban on other countries, African countries are also included. Where do you think Africa should start this conversation around putting some level of closure or approaching something close to an end within a timeline to building a safer Africa, where if we want to start that conversation, because what I'm realizing now is the fact that for the fact that Rwanda is safe today doesn't guarantee that Rwanda is going to be safe tomorrow if borders around Rwanda like DR Congo and all of that are having the issues they're having. So what is happening in Chad is affecting us. So nobody's really safe in that sense. Where should we start this conversation about making Africa safer in 1 minute?
Oh, wow. It's a lot to unpack in 1 minute, but this I can tell you, I think from the Western and the Eastern construct, Northeast Nigeria is now the #1 safe haven for terrorist activities, not only in Sub-Saharan Africa, but globally. And this is the fact of the matter that we do not have institutions that is very continuous in nature. Change in government kind of reduces our appetite for securing Africa. Africa has not been secured in a long time, and it will not secure in the nearest future because of our appetite towards security. I'm not making any provocation, proclamation. It's just a historical context and historical fact and what I see happening on this current dispensation. We don't see security as the main bane of our existence. And until we see that, we will not be able to kind of counter a lot of, how the rest of the world view us. Africa is unstable, and until we have the political will to actually, kind of deal with this issue, we'll not be able to make any conversation that is quite reputable in nature to be able to say, you know what, we are very serious for this. So look at what's going on in Mali, Burkina Faso, and whatnot, and what is going on in Niger, Chad as well, and also bleeding into Nigeria. Of course, DRC, of course, almost there's, as of this morning, about 15 conflicts going on across Africa that can easily be dealt with. So to answer your question, it's going to be extremely hard to Africa and the global south to make a stand that, you know what, we are ready to secure. But again, that could be a design or that could be a bug as well, depending on the optics at which you're looking at it.
Well, thank you, Major Adebe Adeleke, a retired immigrant, U.S. Army officer, joining us from Abuja studio. Is also a human security expert. Mr. Kabiru Adamu, security risk management expert, MD, Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited. Gentlemen, as always, thank you for coming on the program and for your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back after this break, we want to talk about the institution, one of Nigeria's most important institutions, the Independent National Electoral Commission. There's been a lot when it comes to our recruiting process. We're talking about building confidence in citizens to believe that their votes count. Where do we start from in fixing INEC? They've done some great things, but there's a lot that needs to be done. That's the next conversation after the break. Join us again.
Welcome back. Fix INEC has been a major buzzword for the past few weeks now, with movements here and there calling for, well, an upgrade to Nigeria's electoral process. So it's about INEC, but it's about the larger electoral process, really, electoral reforms. Midway to 2027, few months away from the Anambra governorship election, so it's important to keep track of all these developments. And we're joined by Mr. Samson Itodo. Right. He's Executive Director, Yaga Africa. He joins us virtually from Brussels. Mr. Itodo, you're welcome to the morning brief.
A very good morning to you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Before we get to that big talk around fixed INEC, what does a fixed INEC look like? How close are we to fixing INEC in that sense? But obviously the larger picture is electoral reforms. I just want to touch on the Anambra election, the coming Anambra election. So INEC released a list of the political parties, by extension, the candidates who will participate in that. 16 of them, and campaigns are meant to begin on June the 11th. And from what you've seen so far, just to feel the pulse of you and perhaps other election watchers in the country, are you satisfied with the build-up to the Anambra governorship election?
Well, thanks, Kayode and Geoffrey. I think that to a large extent, the build-up to the Anambra elections clearly indicates that
yes, we are heading for perhaps what we might call a very interesting election, but also maybe a secured and peaceful election compared to the elections that held a few years ago. It is clear, unlike that election where prior to the election there were issues around sit-at-home orders. It's not like it's not existing now, but I think to a large extent it's been curtailed. Yes, even though you have some measure of insecurity in Anambra, it's not in the scale that we saw prior to the last election. So it looks like we might have some peaceful election. In terms of INEC preparations, INEC has indicated that it is preparing for the elections. The publication of the list of candidates is a testament to that. We hope that there'll be, increased voter education for the voters to understand why this election is important, but also how they can cast their vote. I think more importantly is the issue relating to voter registration, the continuous voter registration, whether new voters are going to be able to cast their votes ahead of the election. So if you look at the time, when will CVR be conducted and PVCs produced before the November elections? It is possible, but it's actually really very, very tight given our history. So on the whole, we can say it's still early days, but not so early. But as you can see from the parties, their candidates have emerged. There are one or two controversies, but I think we are on course for the Anambra elections.
Well, we hope that all things go smoothly with that one, because I think it will also be some sort of foretaste to what to expect for 2027. We have, of course, other state elections ahead of that.
Well, the ones you should be looking forward to is the Osun election, which is the last election, and
before
as you can
2027.
See, a lot of political intrigues happening in the state, which can impact on, how the election is conducted.
Certainly, we've seen the governor meeting. The PDP governor, by the way, meeting with the APC president and all of that. So obviously, as you said, it's going to be one of the litmus tests. So 16 political parties for that one, 14 male candidates, 2 female candidates for the Anambra election. But, the bigger picture, which is something you touched on as well, is the movement to fix INEC. Now, we've had lots of young people, some civil society, some not, just maybe influencers on social media who took it upon themselves and said, you know what, we need to do something different this time around. So when you hear fix INEC, do you resonate first with that movement? And what does a fixed INEC, or let me say fixed electoral system, look like for you?
Of course, I resonate with the call for fixing INEC. You guys know that 4 or 5 years ago, both Channels TV and Yaga Africa, started this whole campaign around fixing Nigeria's elections. And so I completely identify with the struggle for a fixed INEC. Again, the conclusion for most the election observers in the last election is that INEC and our electoral governance architecture requires fundamental reforms. And I'm really excited to see that citizens, are taking up this campaign, owning it, and demanding electoral reforms, because it's not just a role for civil society like Yaga Africa and the others. And so when we see movements of this nature, it really tells us that Nigerians have not given up on democracy. They've also not given up on our democratic institutions. What does a new INEC, a fixed INEC, looks like? There are 3 fundamental issues. The first one is that a fixed INEC is an independent INEC. A fixed INEC is an INEC that is not superintended by people who have partisan leanings. A fixed INEC is an INEC that has resident electoral commissioners who have not been involved in political campaigns, who don't have videos and social media posts of them campaigning, for a party. A fixed INEC is one where the Senate performs due diligence on the individuals that are appointed by the president. A fixed INEC is an INEC where The appointing authority is no longer the president, but vested in a multi-stakeholder institution as proposed by the Justice Ways Committee. So when you think about a fixed INEC, you think about INEC as an independent entity, because there's a reason why the independence of the Electoral Commission is non-negotiable, because elections are superintended over unbiased umpires. When you have biased umpires, when you have people who have partisan leanings, the results that you get are outcomes that are tainted and are not reflective of the will of the people. A fixed INEC is also an INEC that is competent. Coyote, 2 weeks ago, we saw that 3 resident electoral commissioners were removed from office based on an address by the president and 2/3 majority of the National Assembly. Why? Aside the fact that some of them were corrupt, they were involved in bribery, the other issue was incompetence. A classic example is the REC in Sokoto, the former REC in Sokoto. In fact, in the recent elections, you cannot compare the quality of the Edo elections and the Ondo elections, because the REC in Ondo, Barrister Mrs. Babalola, was a former director of legal at INEC. She had a competence. So when we say independent INEC, it's not just independent, but a competent INEC. Therefore, individuals who should go to INEC must have, the diversity of skills to manage elections. The second point, it's about the transparency of the results management process. The weakest link of our electoral process is that our results management process are so vulnerable to capture and manipulation. And this is why citizens are advocating that a fixed INEC is an INEC that transmits results electronically. And the only way the commission can do that is if the law clearly states that it is mandated to transmit results, but not a discretionary power that it has. Because when you give the commission discretionary power, in other words, if you say the commission may, the commission can decide not to transmit electronically, and then they would not be held liable, like the decision of the Supreme Court. So if the Supreme Court has said that electronic transmission or the IREV is not part of the collation system, what we should be advocating the National Assembly to do is to make IREV, make electronic transmission part of the collation process, but not to substitute the manual process, because both of them will have to go hand in hand.
On that particular IREV issue, which is, I think it was a game changer. It's one of the things INEC brought in that was so innovative, generated a lot of enthusiasm, because at least for the first time in a long while, at that level, we can, get to see in real time which they themselves eventually messed up. So, for instance, coming to work here at Channels TV, there are basically 3 ways the HR will know you came to work. You clock in, or if they see the CCTV cameras, and then those of us that are presenters, you see us on TV. So there are different ways to know. Now, for the IREV, it was only one of the best things it did was to help us build confidence in citizens to see real time how the voting is proceeding. Why do you think it's difficult to make sure that we elevate the status of the IREV to EC8A and make them part of the collating system? Because it's common sense. Why is common sense so hard to implement?
Well, common sense is so hard to implement if you have politicians who want to win elections at all costs and use power, not to solve the problems that people face, but to use power to primitively accumulate wealth or use power to oppress the people. The key question is, why do politicians have a budget to compromise INEC as part of their election expenses? The reason is simple. They want to force themselves on the people. So they put all sorts of pressure on INEC, on election officials, to do what? To undermine the process. The reason why you will not, there's lethargy, and reluctance to properly and legally institutionalize this. It's because of the potential that technology has for limiting human interference, because they know very well that the beavers and the IREF are game changers. They have footprints. They can actually limit manipulation, even though they have their own challenges. But they are so scared of technology, not because we don't have the capacity, but because technology can leave imprints, it can leave footprints, and it can detect errors. And this is just the problem, because transparency, IREF ensures transparency. What the IREF does, that at the polling units, when elections have been concluded, once results have been recorded on the EC8A, immediately the presiding officer, in the presence of everybody, takes an image of the results and puts it on the beavers and upload on the portal. When you do real-time upload, what it does is that for the politicians who are compromising collation officers, they can no longer do that because the results are already known. And so collation officers would also restrain themselves from manipulating the process, because if you check the entire value chain, you can detect where the error is. And this is just a real and fundamental reason. Forget all the excuses about technology penetration. That is just inexcusable, because the beavers was used in all the 154,000 polling units where election held in the 2023 elections.
Well, Mr. Itodo, it's a grim picture that you paint of, the status quo as far as the electoral process is concerned. But you were talking about what a fixed INEC looks like, and there's nothing wrong in dreaming. But what stands between Nigerians and that dream now is the 104 proposals that INEC has presented to the National Assembly. Yes, there are reports that the Commission has had an initial meeting with the Committee on Electoral Reform. What do you see in the resolve of that committee and indeed the National Assembly, the political will to commence the critical debate that will take us from here now to those reforms that will translate into a fixed INEC?
I think there are several, promising signs, I would say, with this reform process. And I'm very, very optimistic, because the National Assembly, the two committees in the Senate and the House have been involved in remarkable work and consultations on this issue. In fact, INEC has also articulated its own proposals for reforms. But there are 5 major reforms that can fix INEC and fix our electoral process, and we've talked about them. The first one is INEC's independence. How do we safeguard INEC's independence? The second one is electronic transmission of results. Make it mandatory and not discretionary in the electoral process. The third one is concluding all election matters, all election petitions, before a winner of an election takes the oath of office. In other words, conclude election petitions before swearing in, because that way you create a level playing field for all. You don't give the incumbent an advantage, to interfere with the process or influence judicial outcomes. The fourth one relates to Electoral Offences Commission, that you have electoral impunity pervading every aspect of our electoral process, but you do need an institution that is independent to prosecute electoral offenders. And lastly, is opening up the process for voters to cast their vote, because the turnout for elections is very low. And in other words, like INEC is proposing, we shouldn't use the PVCs anymore. I see there's a lot of disinformation out there about this proposal, and perhaps I use this opportunity to correct that. That when we say that you need alternative forms of voter identification election day, it's for 2 reasons. One, the BVAS contains the register of voters, right? Therefore, if a voter shows up on the day of elections and they have their national identity or a passport or any other official identification, they should be allowed to cast their vote because their facial and their biometric is already on the BVAT. Because what we would have done is to protect the rights of most Nigerians, majority of Nigerians who couldn't vote in the last election because they didn't have their PVCs. And INEC is now saying you can download your PVCs, from the website. That way we open up the process and not make it difficult for people, because this thing about no PVCs, no vote, that aphorism is actually obsolete given our present reality.
Definitely. And we certainly look forward to that changing for 2027, even for the Osun election, right? We have about a minute to close, and I want you to speak to this, I wouldn't call it a controversy, but this INEC did not register a new political party because the coalition was hoping to have a new political party, right? So do you think that's overreaching? Do you think it's just INEC saying, well, it's what the law is, but there could have been a way to still find some arrangement to register a new political party since there's some coalition backing that up? And the part where former minister said that if this current INEC chairman was the one in power, or at least at the helms in 2015, then the APC wouldn't have won.
Well, don't drag me into the politics of this. But I think to look at the question about party registration, political associations have a constitutional right for association. It's part of their right. And no institution should assault or undermine that right. The Constitution is clear on the procedure for registration of parties. Parties should strive to fulfill those conditions. And when they fulfill those conditions, INEC cannot deny a political party, registration. And where it does that, I encourage the parties to go to court and challenge it, because currently we've seen the court deliver judgments compelling INEC to recognize some political associations as parties. So INEC cannot and should not do that. It will be overreaching itself. It will be undermining the Constitution to fail to register parties, especially when those parties, have met the condition.
So I'm not going to drag into the politics of things. Let's just keep it at that. But we have to thank you so much for providing some more insight into this Fix INEC movement. It's something we'll stay with. We've been speaking with Mr. Samson Itodo, the Executive Director of YAGA Africa. Thank you for your time, and wish you the very best in your engagement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we have a few feedback from our audience for you this morning. I think we could just start with this email from Amechi David about the border fence. Some are calling it a border wall already. And Amechi David says, my opinion about building borders to reduce the influx of terrorists suggested by the Chief of Defense Staff would work. These terrorists have sophisticated weapons that will blow down the walls. Building the wall will be a waste of resources. Building walls won't stop them from entering Nigeria, this user thinks.
Oh, we have this one from another user. The name is not there, but it's from a story from
That's
yesterday.
from Monday. What's up?
Oh, from Monday, okay. Monday says the attack on the community in Port Harcourt is to show how hanging this country called Nigeria is. I think in a normal sense of intelligence, when you suspect a place, send officers on foot patrol and surveillance and intelligence gathering of the suspected place, not just shooting from the aircraft. The Air Force has to pay for the damages done to the community, to both human and the environment. This is from Monday, and it's a reaction to the story from yesterday about the Air Force shooting from an aircraft on a community suspected to be involved in crude oil. But what we saw on ground was more like a palm oil situation. Yeah.
And it happened on May the 21st.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's so much on the show for today. Thank you so much for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. Bye-bye.
Sunrise Daily is up next, so stay with Channels Television. All through the day, we got you covered. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Kayode Okikulu. Goodbye.